Section 2, Video 5, Square Roots Property. Now this is another method of solving quadratic equations, but it's unique to the situation where in the equation itself you have an x squared term which makes it quadratic, but you're missing the x term. So for example, down here we have an r squared, an x squared, and an n squared, and that's the only thing that is present in terms of the variables. And what that allows us to do is we can isolate the x squared term, take the root to undo the square, and then that would solve our equation. However, we have to remember that when we have something of the form like this, and we root to solve, there are two solutions. Now let's do a little history here briefly. For example, the root of 9 is 3. So it's accepted that the root of any number is a positive value. However, if I ask the question, what squared gives you 9, there are two possibilities. One is 3 squared gives me 9, but also negative 3 squared gives me 9. So when we undo the root to solve for that variable, then we have to say x equals a plus or a minus 3, representing two possibilities. So again, it's when it's in that form, what squared equals a number, and you root to solve, you have to consider two possible answers, unlike when you have the square root of a number, which is always positive. So in these questions here, we would isolate the root by adding 6 to both sides, and we would get r squared equals 16. We would root both sides to solve, and here's where we have to think big picture and understand that there are two possibilities here. It could be a positive or a negative 4 to give you 16. Now, this method of solving gives us solutions that we call roots. Just like graphing gives us solutions called x-intercepts, and factoring gives us solutions that are called zeros. These are called roots. They're still solutions, but just go by a different name. In the next one, we have to isolate the root isolate the square before we root it, which would give us x squared, and 488 divided by 8 is 61. We would root both sides to get rid of the square, and again we have x equals a plus minus root 61, and that's good enough. We don't have to go any further. We don't have to make it a decimal. That's considered the exact answer. Our next one, we would add 5 to both sides and get negative 7n squared equals a negative 693. We would divide both sides by negative 7, and n squared equals a positive 99. We would root both sides to undo the square, which would give us n equals a plus minus root 99. Now sometimes you can simplify the root, and it's recommended that we do, just like we normally would simplify most things. So I would say n equals a plus minus, and 99 is the same as 9 times 11, and I can root 9. And that root 9 becomes a 3, and we have root 11. So we would say plus or minus 3 root 11. And again, that's the exact answer. And this ends Section 2, Video 5.